Okay, so I was sitting in class today, actually my fairy tale class, so it's where it's relevant, and we were going over some things just about how to study fairy tales, and I thought that'd probably be a good idea. So this video is called Things to Know About the Study of Fairy Tales, and it's basically what we learned in the first couple days of class about how we're actually going to look at these fairy tales. And I figure since I like hearing myself talk, at some point I'm going to start trying to think critically about these fairy tales instead of just reading them and reacting to them in a presumably weird manner or something. So I thought I would go over some of the terms I might end up using and some of the ways people actually study fairy tales, so that you're kind of on the same page, I guess. I'm learning more and more every single day in class, so as I learn, I guess I'll tell you guys what I learned. I think the first thing I'm going to say is that there are no original versions of fairy tales. A lot of the time, especially when Disney comes up, people say, well, yeah, The Little Mermaid's a good movie, but in the original version, she got her feet poked by 1,000 red-hot knives every time she walked in exchange for getting to walk on land, which is true in the Christian Andersen version of Little Mermaid. But my point is that there are no original versions of fairy tales. And the reason why is because fairy tales originally sprung from oral tradition. Like way back when people peasant class couldn't write, they'd tell these stories over campfires. And as these stories changed hands, they would, grow and evolve. Eventually, writers started transcribing them. And that's when you get things like from Perrault and Basile and the Grimm brothers. But everyone's familiar with the Grimm brothers, but those are not the original versions of fairy tales. Those aren't by any means original. Perrault predates the Grimm brothers by 80 years, and Basile predates Perrault by, 100 years or something ridiculous. So when people say like the original versions and they're referring to the Grimm, well, Grimm borrowed stuff from Perrault and Perrault borrowed stuff from Basile, who borrowed stuff from the oral storytellers. So just let's not ever get caught in the original version, because there really isn't one, because there's stories in China that mirror, the European fairy tales. So keep that in mind. Okay, the three most common ways of critical thinking about fairy tales, well, I should preface this with there's a billion different ways to think critically about things. You can think about things from a philosophical perspective, you can think about things from a black perspective, you can do things from basically any perspective ever. But the three most common and probably most useful ones when it comes to fairy tale study is the Marxist, the feminist, and the psychoanalytic. The psychoanalytic, it's what it sounds like. You psychoanalyze the characters, the narrator, the people reading, the people of the time period in which the story is set. Psychoanalyze. I have taken one psychology class in my life. It was intro psych, and it was in my junior year of high school, so I'm probably going to stay away from that one for fear of screwing up everything. The other two, one of them is Marxist, and Marxist critical thinking, you don't have to be really familiar with Marx, just know that it's about social class, because the authors who transcribed the oral stories were doing it so that the upper crust could read them. So already there's a bit of a schism between classes there. So in the stories you get these really weird interplays between class and society and stuff. So whenever I say from a Marxist perspective, that's what I'm talking about. The last one is feminist, and I know there's this weird knee-jerk reaction people have, and it's like, feminazi bra burners! And I'm like, no, that's not what feminism is today. Feminism is just the study of gender. And it's looking at the way gender is used in a story, look at the way women are portrayed, look at the way men are portrayed. Men are stereotyped just as much as women, it's just less well publicized. So when I say the feminist, it also includes queer studies and just every way a gender is portrayed. It doesn't matter if it's male, female, or something in between, or something outside of both. It's just gender. So, feminist. Feminist, Marxist, and psychoanalytic. Remember that. Next, I just want to rehash the whole oral tradition thing. If you've ever been reading a fairy tale, and I'm sure you'll remember something like this from reading Grimm as a kid, it'll be like, the story's just going along, and it goes along for 15 pages, and then suddenly a character who's been there from the beginning, the narrator says, turns out she was a witch, she pulled out her magic wand, and then the story progresses, and you're like, you didn't think to tell me that? Like, 10 pages ago? Why did that just pop up out of nowhere? Well, it's because in the oral tradition, if a storyteller forgets something or gets to a point in the story and realizes somebody needs to be a witch to advance the plot, they just have to throw it out there and add it in. And so if you ever see those weird little throw it out moments in fairy tales, it's because the author has actually kind of maintained some of that oral tradition feel to it, which is pretty neat when you think about it. So that's actually a really cool moment. So you're getting kind of closer to the source the more moments like that a story has. The next thing I want to bring up is, well, there's more stuff I want to bring up, but it makes no sense out of context when there's no story in this video, so I'm not going to bring that up. But I think the last thing I want to bring up is that there are, we call versions of fairy tales variants of fairy tales. Just our buzzword. I don't know if everybody does it, if it's just my class, but variants of fairy tales. The last thing I want to say is that I've never edited or made videos in my life, and I've certainly never posted them on YouTube. So, sorry if they suck. Bye.